We're on.
Saying setting up your YouTube live. Give it a few more seconds and we'll get started. Yep, you're live.
Thank you, Prabhu. We're on.
Yep. Saying setting up your YouTube live. Give it a few more seconds and we'll get started. Yep, you're live.
Thank you, Prabhu. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 4, Text 7 and 8. Let me begin with Text 7. Tam agatam tatra kaschanadriyad vimanitam yajnakrito bhayajana rite swashvai jananim cha sadaraha prema shrukantya parishashvajurmudha. Let me read it again. Tam agatam tatra kaschanadriyad vimanitam yajnakrito bhayajana rite swashvai jananim cha sadara prema shrukantya parishashvajurmudha. Synonyms: tam, her; sati, agatam, having arrived; tatra, there; na, not; kaschana, anyone; adriyat, received; vimanitam, not receiving respect; yajnakrita, of the performer of the sacrifice, Daksha; bhayat, from fear; jana, person; rite, except; swashri, her own sisters; vai, indeed; jananim, mother; cha, and; sa adara, with respect; prema ashrukantya, whose throats were filled with tears of affection; parishashvaju, embraced; mudha, with glad faces. Translation: When Sati with her followers reached the arena, because all the people assembled were afraid of Daksha, none of them received her well. No one welcomed her but her mother and sisters, who with tears in their eyes and with glad faces welcomed her and talked with her very pleasingly. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The mother and sisters of Sati could not follow the others, who did not receive Sati very well. Due to natural affection, they immediately embraced her with tears in their eyes and with loving feelings. This shows that women as a class are very soft-hearted. Their natural affection and love cannot be checked by artificial means. Although the men present were very learned Brahmanas and demigods, they were afraid of their superior Daksha, and because they knew that their welcoming Sati would displease him, although in their minds they wanted to receive her, they could not do so. Women are naturally soft-hearted, but men are sometimes very hard-hearted. I'm going to read text 8 as well. Saudarya samparshna samartha vartaya matra cha matra svarbhishcha sadaram dattam saparyam varam ashanam cha sa nadatta pitra pratinandita sati. One more time. Saudarya samparshna samartha svartaya matra cha matra svarbhishcha sadaram dattam saparyam varam ashanam cha sa nadatta pitra pratinandita sati. Saudarya of her sisters, Samprashna with the greetings, Samartha proper, Vartaya tidings, Matra by her mother, Cha and Matra Swashbhi by her aunts, Cha and Sa Adaram along with respect, Dattam which was offered, Saparyam worship, adoration is the other synonym. So Saparyam is worship and adoration. Varam, presence. Ashanam. Asanam is a seat. Cha and Sa, she, Sati. Na Adatta, did not accept. Pitra, by her father. Apratinandita, not being welcomed. Sati, Sati. Translation. Excuse me. Excuse me. Although she was received by her sisters and mother, she did not reply to their words of reception. And although she was offered a seat and presence, she did not accept anything, for her father neither talked with her nor welcomed her by asking about her welfare. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jai. Sati did not accept the greetings offered by her sisters and mother, for she was not at all satisfied by her father's silence. Sati was the youngest child of Daksha, and she knew that she was his pet. But now, because of her association with Lord Shiva, Daksha forgot all his affection for his daughter, and this very much aggrieved her. The material body conception is so polluted that even upon slight provocation, all our relationships of love and affection are nullified. Bodily relationships are so transient that even though one is affectionate towards someone in a bodily relationship, a slight provocation terminates this intimacy. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome this Sunday morning. Thank you for joining us. Today we're reading from Canto 4, Chapter 4, Text 7 and 8. And this is perhaps one of the most emotional and significant moments, even in the Bhagavatam, where Mother Sati is experiencing such intense emotions. And this is at Daksha sacrifice where there are numerous, very, very elevated personalities. And Daksha himself is a very elevated Prajapati for that matter. And as we've been reading, these verses occur in Daksha's sacrifice after Sati ignores Lord Shiva's advice and counsel, and in spite of that, goes for the sacrifice, her father's yajna. And at the least, she expects some minimal affection, but instead she encounters nothing but social silence and emotional rejection, social silence from all those who are gathered there. I mean, these are very, very elevated personalities sitting and attending the yajna that Daksha is organizing. And Sati is also not only experiencing or receiving that social silence, but she's also experiencing the emotional rejection. The emotional rejection being the one that's coming from her father. Like her father, Daksha, is completely ignoring her. He's not saying anything, but he's ignoring her. And that ignorance can be extremely painful, as we will discuss further. And this becomes the turning point that leads to her renunciation of the body. And again, I want to emphasize this leads to the renunciation of her body, or rather, I should rephrase that, leads to her renunciation of the body. The subtle difference here, even in the English language, is we're saying, we are emphasizing the fact that it is Sati's renunciation of the body, not the other way around. We're not saying the renunciation of her body, because we tend to attach ourselves to our body. We tend to identify ourselves with our bodies. So I want to make that distinction, and that's why I'm consciously, rephrasing this, and we need to mindfully think about Sati's renunciation. She is renouncing the body because she knows she is such a spiritually elevated personality that she knows the difference, in terms of the essence being not accepting and identifying oneself with the material body. And that is what we even see that, later on in the following verses, when she actually immolates herself, she's doing it with a feeling of renunciation there. She doesn't care about the body because the body is temporary anyways. Right. Okay. So enough said about that. But again, this is not just about a family disagreement. It's not about a social conflict or a ritualistic dispute. It's not about something that is not being done right in the ritual, for instance. But it's not only about Daksha and the feelings he has against Lord Shiva, but there is a deep spiritual lesson for all of us in terms of pride, in terms of relationships, in terms of devotion, in terms of social pressure, and we'll discuss some of this. And the difference here is the difference between the ritual and the heart, right? Sometimes we go through things so mechanically that we forget why we're doing it. We focus so much on the what of the ritual. This needs to be done, that needs to be done, this is the sequence. So we get caught up in those things so mechanically to the point that we even forget why we're doing it. What is the essence? So it's not coming from the heart, but rather it's coming from the mind. So that having given you some context now, let's start with verse 7. So the translation is, when Sati, with her followers, reached the arena, because all the people assembled were afraid of Daksha, none of them received her well. No one welcomed her but her mother and sisters, who, with tears in their eyes and with glad faces, welcomed her and talked with her very pleasingly. So, as I was reading this, three themes stuck out for me. First of all, social fear overrides dharma or religion. See, when you look at it, people who present there were very elevated, prominent sages. There were even demigods attending, from the skies above. There were learned brahmanas. There were eminent Prajapatis. But none welcomed Sati. None welcomed Sati. Why? Because they were afraid of Daksha. And this is astonishing. Why? Because, first of all, Sati is no ordinary personality. Secondly, she is the daughter of Daksha. And not just that, she is the wife of Lord Shiva, who is no ordinary personality by any means. And still, nobody welcomed her. So sometimes fear of authority can silence even the most wise. And Prabhupada, in one of his lectures said, although everyone was willing to receive sati, it's not like, the people who were sitting there in attendance were saying, no, I don't want to welcome sati. They all loved her. They all wanted to welcome sati. But strictly out of fear of Daksha, they refrained. So sometimes we know what is right, but we're afraid to speak up. We don't act. But that spontaneity is lost. Why? Because we are afraid as to, how are other people going to perceive us? How is my message going to be perceived? Am I going to be rejected? Am I going to be humiliated? Right? Are people going to turn against me? Are there going to be people who are going to denounce me? Am I going to lose my social position by speaking for the truth, by standing up, by expressing my courage of conviction? That spontaneity is completely lost in the of the moment, especially when we're in a social gathering or we're on a social platform for that matter. Our courage of conviction takes a secondary place. Instead, we put ourselves in the center. We put our feelings, our emotions, our pride and prestige in the center. So social pressure can act in different ways. So there's an example. Early in my career, my employer had a team of Japanese come in for a set of meetings. And there were business meetings, and I was asked to, facilitate those meetings. And the interesting part was there were a group of Japanese, about six, seven of them, and every time I spoke, only one person would speak. Even though I was addressing, like we do here, we would, address everybody in the room. And sometimes I even, would pose a question or, would try to bring about, start a discussion. But only one person at the head of the table would, on the other side, would speak. So I was kind of amused. And I also noticed that the other person was, most of the time his eyes were closed. So I wasn't even sure if he was hearing me out, if he understood me, because they had just come from Japan. And so this was this, I'm talking about, 35, 36 years ago. So things were still a little raw for me, coming to the US and getting into the work culture here. So I wasn't sure, how I should deal with, a situation like that. But then I realized that these folks who were sitting there, even though I was trying to have a discussion with them individually in the group setting, only one person was speaking because they did not want to speak out of turn. They wanted to stay quiet and give their superior, in this case, their manager, out of respect to speak. But that was out of respect. Take the other, stark example of the attempt to disrobe Draupadi, right? When Dushasana was trying to disrobe Draupadi in the assembly of all the men there, a lot of elevated personalities, prominent personalities there. But nobody spoke. Nobody spoke, leave alone coming to her rescue. Not even Bhishma Dev came to the rescue of Draupadi, right? Here's another current example, something that we can relate to more recently. The leader decides to go to the war and no one even speaks out. Millions of people are impacted, displaced, children are being killed, women are left without husbands, parents without their sons and daughters. No one speaks up. No one is, coming out, sticking their necks out to say, this has got to stop. So, out of social pressure or the fear of rejection or fear of being reprimanded or fear of being censured, right? Even humiliation for that matter, people tend to take the back seat. And this is exactly what happened here, right? So, external religiosity by itself does not guarantee spiritual courage. When I say spiritual courage, I'm talking about courage of conviction, doing what is right, not putting myself in the center to see, oh, am I going to get impacted? Are people going to, insult me in return? No. Instead, using the Brahminical knowledge, using the spiritual knowledge to determine, to discern, to discriminate, what is right from wrong, and being able to speak up, having a voice is something that is so, so, so very important. Time, place, and circumstances absolutely that needs to be considered. I'm not saying, going out there and just opening our mouths and saying it in a way, So the way we deliver the message is also very important. Our acharyas have told us, and there are numerous examples, how our message is delivered. Even the harshest of the messages, even the harshest truths that have to be disclosed or shared or delivered, they have to be delivered in a way knowing the audience, knowing the receiver. That is where our spiritual maturity comes into play. But at the same time, putting ourselves in the center is not the right thing. And this is a lesson even for me. I mean, this is something that I find myself caught up many, 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 many times, depending on the situation. And by the time I process the whole thing, it is too late. I haven't done the right thing, or it is, just pure silence because all the thoughts are running through my head. And this happens to most of us. But being able to speak up, assessing the situation, and that's the spiritual maturity which comes with the courage of conviction, and then being able to deliver that message in a way that is right, but at the same time in a way that is also pleasing is also important. So the delivery of the message is important, and the message, most importantly, driven by the courage of conviction, is the most important. Now, the second theme that I want to, that really, really stuck out at me is that genuine affection, genuine affection coming from the heart is more important than, the superficial religiosity, for instance. See, if you look at it in this situation, only her mother, her sisters, Sati's mother, her sisters were the ones who welcomed Sati open-heartedly, with open arms. They were also there. Daksha was there. And other, esteemed personalities, sages, all of these folks were there. But did that stop the mother and the sisters from, running out to Sati and welcoming her with open arms? No, it didn't. And why? How come, in the case of the mother and the sisters, they did not restrain and restrict themselves? Because in this case, I mean, not just in this case, but I'm talking about how, as the purport also says, as Srila Prabhupada has mentioned, women tend to be more soft-hearted, and also, the love is flowing naturally. The love is spontaneous. There's no calculation involved. There's no fear involved. There's no strategy involved. Oh, we got to do this. And if I do this, that happens. If that happens, I do this. It's not a chess game. It's something that's coming from the heart. And mothers and sisters, for them, it is much more natural. It just comes out spontaneously. So love flows naturally. And Vishwanath Chakravarti also mentions in one of his commentaries, how, spiritual love completely overrides protocol, social protocol. It just flows so spontaneously and naturally that there is no restraint. And that's the hallmark of bhakti, right? Bhakti is to be expressed from the heart. It's not a calculated, measured kind of a thing, that's coming from the mind. So it is love over rules, right? Niyama is good. Following the rules is good, but even better is expressing that love, expressing that bhakti. In fact, if I remember, when the first videos of Srila Prabhupada's life, his biography was being depicted in in a video format, where we had several videos being released on a monthly basis. One of the videos he showed Prabhupada's early days, where he was in one of these one of these yagyas, and there were the brahmanas who were reciting mantras, and all the the sacrificial smoke, fire, all of that was happening. But there were, a few who were also chanting, the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And Prabhupada encouraged them to sing louder and louder, even at the risk of being, spoken down to by the brahmanas who were performing the sacrifice. He wasn't afraid. He knew that he was doing the right thing. He could see, he could feel, he could sense that, these few who were chanting the Mahamantra, it was coming from their hearts. It was not a mechanical chanting. But his reaction was so spontaneous. And again, it's coming from the base of love, right? From bhakti. That is the underlying principle. So rules are good. Rules keep us in order. They set the guardrails. But more importantly is inculcating that feeling of spontaneous love for the Supreme. That overrides everything. Now, take this extreme example of Krishna himself exhibiting and demonstrating that. Sudama arrives at the gates, and Krishna gets word that Sudama is at the gates. Krishna is in his palace up there in Dwaraka. The moment he hears, and Lakshmi Devi is attending to his feet, is pressing his feet, and attending to his needs, and Krishna finds out Sudama has arrived, his old friend from long long ago, so he immediately drops everything and he just tells Lakshmi Devi, let me go. And off he runs out of the palace, down the steps, several steps. He's not thinking about his garments, his crown, his jewelry, his position. He's not thinking about any of that. People are just wondering what's going on. The on by, stand by, the onlookers are looking in total astonishment. And Krishna runs all the way down to Sudama, hugs him warmly, welcomes him, speaks to him with tears flowing out of his eyes. And Sudama is taken aback as well. I mean, you can imagine. And then Sudama is taken lovingly into Krishna's inner quarters. And there he seats him on his bed and then asks for water to be brought so that he could wash the feet of Sudama's tired feet. He drops himself to his knees and then he washes Sudama's feet lovingly with, tears just pouring. So there's no tinge of any kind of social protocol where he's saying, oh, I'm the king of Dwaraka, I need to be respected, I am blah blah blah. None of that. I mean, just even for us, as we hear this this pastime, it just melts our heart. it just brings all those emotions out, and it's one of the best pastimes, especially for me. I hold it very dearly. I mean, it's for everything that we go through in this world, trying to achieve this, achieve that, to be this, to be that, to fulfill, other people's expectations of us, from our parents to our teachers to our, colleagues at work, to our employers, our managers, all of these expectations being thrown at us, and we're trying to, get over all of that, and we're trying to be the best, and make it to the American dream, being overachievers, and we push ourselves, push ourselves, push ourselves for what, right? And here we see Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, dropping everything, dropping to his knees, and washing the feet of Sudama. So we need to be mindful of that. At the slightest elevation in terms of our position and wealth, people, it's probably, the culture that has developed over the decades and centuries and time, people feel puffed up. They feel so entitled. And it doesn't take much. I mean, we see this in social media. We see this on social platforms. We see it in social gatherings. We see it at work. So the wheels of false ego are constantly, and pride are constantly churning in our minds. And what that does is it basically blocks our love from flowing spontaneously from our hearts. So it becomes a mechanical, calculation in terms of here's how I should respond, you know, like robots. And unfortunately, it's not the right thing to do either, because we are blocking the spontaneity, this love that's there in us, when we're just completely restraining that, blocking it, dampening it, and keeping it behind. Now, the other theme that also comes to mind is, this is again related to this. It's more about ritual without compassion. And it is significant. Why? Because, see, first of all, consider where this is happening, right? This ritual is happening, it's actually a yajna that is for all the good reasons. It's a sacred yajna. So everything was Vedic, everything was being done to the T, everything was being done in a perfect manner, right? But there was what I was just talking about. What was missing? The bhakti, right? The compassion was missing. So religion without the heart, it becomes a dry ritual, all right? So an example that comes to my mind also is, when the Gopas were sent by Krishna while they were in the forest of Vrindavan to go to the nearby Brahmanas who were performing a sacrifice to ask them for some food, because the boys were feeling hungry and Krishna and Balaram were feeling hungry and they wanted to eat something. And what did the Brahmanas do? The Brahmanas just shoot them away. They said, "Don't disturb us. We're in the middle of this yajna. We're doing something very, very, very important. You boys can go find your food somewhere else, but sorry." In spite of the Gopa saying Krishna and Balaram are also hungry, they are here. It didn't really mean much to the Brahmanas. So what did the Gopas do? The Gopas went to the nearby village, and there were gopis there. And the moment they told them that this is what our needs are, the gopis stopped doing what they were doing, immediately attended to preparing food, and preparing food not mechanically but with love. They were so happy to do it. They were so happy they spontaneously, prepared the food, and we know the story after that, right? So it just shows that the spontaneity, the love is what is absolutely required in everything that we do in our services to Krishna, in services to the Vaishnava Sangha, the Sadhu Sangha, how we serve each other, the loving exchanges, right, that we also are taught from the nectar of instruction. All of these things are very, very important. It has to be done with the right frame of mind, but more importantly, with the spontaneity from the heart. And we should do everything to try and keep ourselves out of it. We tend to put ourselves in the center, and that's when the ego, the false ego kicks in. That's when the pride kicks in. That's when suddenly we become conscious about, how are people perceiving us. And when that feeling comes in, it actually blocks our spontaneity. Otherwise, the living entities, it is so nice. Krishna has given us the hearts that can actually, that's filled with love. If we can only peel out all of those external layers of, false ego, pride, of all of these things, position, entitlement, all of these things, just peel them out completely and just have nothing but our hearts filled with love and, serve others with that. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do for us, especially with all the material conditioning and all the various, even regardless of the cultures that we are in, whether it's Eastern culture, Western culture, of course, you'll find variations. But finally, it boils down to putting ourselves in the center of this. So even perfectly performed duties are useless if they're not done, if they do not awaken devotion. In fact, that's one of the verses, Dharma Svanustita Pumsam, Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. This is in the first canto and the second chapter also. So Srimad Bhagavatam constantly mentions that. There's no point going through all of the rituals if our hearts are not in it. It just becomes purely mechanical. And same thing applies to our chanting as well. So when we're chanting, that chanting has to come from the heart like we mean it. Not pure, not mechanically, not because I want to complete my 16 rounds for the day at a minimum, but rather crying out to Krishna, thanking Krishna for giving us his shelter, thanking Krishna for, engaging us in that, in our devotional service, in spite of all these extraneous distractions that are constantly pulling us away from Krishna. So we may be technically correct in terms of how we perform our rituals, but could be spiritually flawed if we don't pay attention to this. So let's move to text 8 in the interest of time. And again, reading the translation. Although she was received by her sisters and mother, she did not reply to their words of reception, and although she was offered a seat and presents, she did not accept anything. For her father neither talked with her nor welcomed her by asking about her welfare. Hmm. So, this also goes to show the gravitas that Sati demonstrated. She was not saying, ha 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 ha, okay, okay, yeah, okay, thank you. And, just going through the spiritual, I mean, the usual social responses people tend to make, just so that they don't want to create a scene, for instance. But rather, she stood her ground. She knew her core was intact. She knew, she was responding, not reacting, responding from the core of her spiritual integrity. So while she was welcomed, she did not react, she did not sit, she did not accept the gifts, because that would be a sign of hypocrisy in a sense, right? And if you look at it, she was completely taken aback by her father's regardless of everybody who was there, including not only, all of these eminent personalities, but also her, her mother, her sisters, who were also extremely dear to her. But that, whole instance of being ignored by the father, and she was the pet daughter of the father also, to make things even worse, right? So she couldn't imagine. And in spite of Daksha not saying anything, but just purely, just merely his ignorance, he ignoring, not ignorance, but merely ignoring Sati, made, pained her so much that, she was responding to that. She was in that state of mind. Because she could recognize very easily that, in spite of all of these pleasantries that were being offered by her mother and sisters and things like that, it the heart was missing from her father. The father was not extending himself, opening his heart and saying, "My dear daughter, please, you're welcome. Please come. Please be seated." So Sati felt very insulted because her father did not show that affection. Devotees value love, not superficial respect. So formality can be seen through, after a certain point in time, we can see that this is more a formality than actual, a sincere expression of love, for instance. As we get older and older, as we go through this, as we have more and more interactions with people in and outside of our, devotional circles, even more so, outside of our devotional circle, we see that there is so much more formality. Hi, how are you doing? Do they really mean it? Have a good day. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Do they really mean it? They don't know you from Adam. Some of these folks, most of these folks. But when they say things like that, what's going through your mind is, do they really, really mean it? Right? So these are formalities, and formalities like these are hypocritical. It's nothing but a form of hypocrisy. So Daksha, that's the next one I wanted to talk about, is that neglect hurts more than the insult, right? Daksha did not openly insult Sati. He was silent, but he ignored her. He ignored her totally. It was like as though she was a non-entity. This is Sati coming into, you know, the yajna to participate with her dear father, with her dear parent, I mean, her mother, with her dear sisters, to be a part of the yajna, to also to be welcomed in a way that she was made a part of that yajna. But instead, what did Daksha do? He just completely ignored her. So sometimes silence hurts much more than harsh words, much more than harsh words, and it creates deeper pain. And Sati was experiencing that pain every moment that she was standing there. She could feel that pain. She could feel it. And it was being directed at her, and directed at her by her very own father. Dhruva Maharaj, when he wanted to sit on the lap of his father, King Uttanapada, what happened? He was denied that position, and the father did not even speak. I believe it, when his stepmother, Surichi, I believe, was the one who, said harsh words. But his father never said a word. He didn't even stop his wife from saying the things that she said. And that hurt Dhruv Maharaj even more. He was like, what? Father, you're not speaking up. You're completely ignoring. In other words, you are silently agreeing with what she is saying and denying me this love and affection, even though I'm your son, not allowing me to, sit on your lap. Something as simple, something as basic as that. Father, you're denying me that right. Father, you're denying me that love. And not just denying me that love, but you're not even speaking up. Staying in silence can be a lot more painful and hurtful than actually speaking those harsh words. Because in the heat of the moment, people will say things, people who are closest to you will say things which are most hurtful, most hurtful. But even that is not as bad as expressing silence by ignoring, the person. So when you look at Dhruv Maharaj, this emotional rejection was so unbearable, even for a 5-year-old boy. I mean, what to speak of Sati, right? A 5-year-old boy like Dhruva Maharaj, he leaves the palace. He takes the advice of his mother. Now, his mother could have stopped him too, but the mother is also encouraging him to do what is right. Again, see her courage of conviction. This is the little boy, this is her little son. He is the heir to the throne, technically speaking, but she is putting all that aside and telling him what is right. As a mother, she is giving him the right advice. Focus on Vishnu. And what does Dhruva Maharaj do? Dhruva Maharaj is not sitting there and saying, okay, okay, that's fine. Today dad is not giving me any attention. Tomorrow he will. No. Instead, he storms out of the palace. He goes out into the forest. So he's leaving everything behind. He's leaving his beloved mother behind. He's leaving the comforts of the palace. He is going knowingly that he's leaving the palace. He doesn't know if he's going to be coming back, but he knows that he's going into a place that is completely unfamiliar. Being in the forest, the dangers of the forest, the dangers of animals, the wild and ferocious beasts, the dangers of, being out there in the nights all by yourself, not knowing how harsh the weather is going to be and if there are going to be snakes and this and that. And at that point in time, he is driven by his anger because he's in so much pain and hurt. And fortunately for him, Lord Narada Muni comes and gives him the advice and, so that he can focus on Vishnu. So we know the story after that. But I'm just saying that, the silence can be extremely, extremely painful. And that could lead to extreme responses like Dhruva Maharaj. And now we will find out in the following verses how Sati also responds to that treatment that she's receiving from her father. So that leads us to the next important lesson, which is bodily relationships are extremely fragile, right? Especially in this material world. Now, it's not like, see, Daksha loved Sati. It's not like he didn't love Sati. She was the youngest of his daughters, and he loved Sati a lot. She was his pet daughter, as Prabhupada also mentions. But in this circumstance, in the moment, Daksha chose to put that aside. And instead, he put himself in the center. And all of a sudden, his fatherly affection, his humility, all that went out the window, right? Instead, he behaved in a way that was extremely painful and hurtful for Sati. So, pride destroys affection. So, Daksha not only insulted Lord Shiva in the presence of all the devotees, all the sages, but he also ignores. Okay, so he has a problem with Lord Shiva. That in itself is bad and wrong. But he actually extends that to his own daughter, Sati. So he's again putting himself in the center and he's demanding respect over the love of his own daughter. And how truly unfortunate. So this clearly tells us, material relationships are very unstable, very unstable. There are so many stories written about love, so many songs sung about love, so many poems written about love. And the whole institution of marriage, as we know it, is also based on love. But look around. What we see that is that the world is growing more and more transactional and less about long-term relationships, right? These are transactional interactions that we have with the people around us, including our own family members. I mean, we hear these horror stories where children are literally, and not literally, they're actually dropping their parents off on the street corner with nothing but their shirts on their backs and abandoning them completely, never to see them again. I mean, how could they even do something like that? I mean, it's totally unimaginable, but it is happening. There are parents, elderly people who are being completely abandoned by their children because of some money issue, because of some harsh word being spoken. Parents who brought these folks, these people, these monsters in a sense into this world, it's completely unimaginable and it is happening. So it is purely transactional. It is not about long-standing relation, not putting things in perspective, but but putting ourselves, bringing ourselves into the center. And there's no humility involved. There's no compassion involved. There's no true love involved. It's purely transactional. You give me this, it's conditional. Even the love is so conditional, right? I will do this, you do this for me. It has to be something that I give in return for something that I'm getting from you. So that's why the divorce rates also have grown, right? The divorce rates are a whopping 34 to 40% the last time I checked. Even in America, the divorce rates are so significant. 34 to 42%. And I'm sure, there are similar rates in other parts of the world as well. Why? Because people lack commitment. People are not focusing on the relationship. They're more focused on themselves, what is good for them, what is coming to them. Everything is so conditional, everything is so short term, transactional. I give you something, you give me immediate benefit. I want to see that immediate gratification. The moment you say something bad about me, done. I'm not going to look at your face. I don't want you in my life. You're out. That's the kind of mentality, that's the kind of mindset that, is growing more and more as Kali Yuga progresses. So relationships are no longer, deep. And not just relationships between individuals, even relationships between countries. We're seeing that happen, right? Okay, so pride definitely destroys relationships. Daksha's pride in this case is being highlighted. It destroyed the affection that he had with his very own daughter, right? And it destroys families. It destroys even the sacrifice. The sacrifice is no longer auspicious anymore, as we will see in the following verses what happens. So this is the beginning of Daksha's downfall. The ball is already, rolling downhill for Daksha. Big time. Big time. Sati, on the other hand, she rejected formal honor, even though she was by her mother and her daughters, she was being offered a seat, been given some gifts and things like that, and respect, because that was still external for her. In her perspective, she was looking for that sign of true love, sincere love, coming from her father, because the father was the one who was organizing this yajna. He was holding himself as the centerpiece for this entire event. You look at it from the aspect or the perspective of the mother and the daughters. They demonstrated, exhibited courage of conviction, right? They didn't say, oh, Daksha is going to chop my head off, or, he's going to scream at me, he's going to denounce me. No, they went all out with open arms to Sati. Whereas all of the others, the very, very esteemed and elevated personalities who were in attendance at the yajna, they all remained silent. I mean, you would expect them to speak up. They are so, learned scholars in terms of the Vedas. They know what is right from wrong. They are the people who meditate and are able to, control their emotions and feelings. They are the most wise. They are supposed to give that counsel, and they are sitting there quietly, which is totally absurd. So the Bhagavatam is teaching us a very important lesson that we all need to inculcate, which is moral courage. We need to have spiritual integrity. We need to not just go by the circumstance, in a trivial way, but go through the circumstance in a way where we are still grounded by the true values that we're being taught through the Bhagavatam, through sadhu, through sangha, through shastra, right? Being firm and standing our ground, having that courage of conviction is super, super important. And that is something, this is, like I said, this is a lesson for me as well. We tend to become weak. It is a show of weakness, actually, if you ask me. Because we're thinking about ourselves, we're putting ourselves in the center. And that's not the right thing to do. Absolutely not the right thing to do. So, from a practical application standpoint, what I'd like to share with you is number one, first of all, let's not sacrifice integrity for social acceptance. My wife tells me it's not, you know, a popularity test. It's not about, people liking you or disliking you, and, keep all of that aside. It's about maintaining that integrity, knowing who you are, knowing your constitutional position, exhibiting the humility with confidence, not humility with as a sign of weakness. So even the sages failed, and therefore we need to develop. The lesson for us is to develop a strong courage of conviction. My I was a prefect of my school, back when I was in high school back in India as I was growing up, and my principal would come and tell us, we were a few prefects, that he would tell us constantly ingrain the same message. You need to have the courage of conviction, courage of conviction, courage of conviction. And at that point in time, I was definitely didn't have the maturity. Not that it's any better now, it's maybe slightly a shade better, but I didn't quite understand what that really meant. What did he mean? He kept telling us you need to have courage of conviction. You need to have the courage of conviction, but it never really got into this, the space between my ears. It was very, very empty at that point in time. So it comes back to me, and this is very, very important, because this particular incident that we are hearing from the Bhagavatam of Sati and Daksha, right, in the sacrifice that Daksha was conducting, this spiritual integrity, this courage of conviction is very, very important. Secondly, we need to value sincerity in our relationships, right? So we need to go beyond this whole facade of, when I say we, I'm not pointing fingers, I'm saying people in general. in and out of our devotional circles, in the circus that we are faced with outside, since I mentioned the term circus. So now in and out of our devotional circles, in the circus that we see on the outside at work and in public places and so on, there will be people who will be nice to you. There will be people who are not so nice to you. There will be people who will say good things to you. Some people who say it for the sake of saying it. So there's a lot of good and bad. But we need to practice sincerity from our side. See, we don't have control over something we don't have control over. How people feel about you, we really don't have control over that. And we don't know what baggage they carry. But from our perspective, we need to be cognizant of what we are giving them. Our association we give to them should be based on rules of sincerity. It should be coming from the heart. Even when we say something bad, and it doesn't have to be only when we're saying something good, right? When we're saying something good, okay, in the spur of the moment, we're saying, oh, this was good, you're so good, you're this, you're that. But even when things are not so good, when the circumstances are bad, speaking the truth is important, of course. Say it in a way that is pleasing, but nevertheless, speak the truth. Because this will be harsh. It'll be hard for the person who's receiving it at the time being, right on at the moment. But in retrospective, that person will actually learn from that. Perhaps not even make the same mistake again. So in that sense, especially getting feedback truly from the heart, from from devotees especially, is so very important. We need to develop that strong, not only strong sense of conviction, but also the sincerity with which we express ourselves. We need to, also the other important lesson is to be in that state of humility. Like I was saying, avoid the pride. Putting yourself in the center is not a good idea. We need to get out of that mindset. Unfortunately, the world outside is constantly saying, you're no good if you're not leading, or if you're not contributing, or you're not, being a value add. You need to, and so people are constantly beating their drums on the outside, saying, I did this, I did that, to stand out so that people can notice them and say, yeah, you've done a great job. But truly speaking, humility is something that we need to develop, because that doership mentality goes away with that. We know who we are, our core values of sincerity, of love, right? So we're getting out of this whole mode of duplicity. All of that then automatically starts falling away, right? If we can constantly be in that mood and maintain that core value, I think that would be the way to do it. So these two verses that we discussed today are a significant lesson for us in many ways. When you look at it from Daksha's angle, from Sati's angle, from the angle of her mother and her sisters, from the angle of the sages who've been sitting there, in the sacrifice. When you put all of these things, we have several lessons that we can take away. And again, it all boils down to, the courage of conviction, having the humility, not putting ourselves in the center, and expressing our love from the heart, not being ritualistic about it, not being driven by rules, but being able to execute those rules with love. That's when bhakti comes in. The rules are only training us to think in a certain way. Maybe there's a lot of unlearning that we need to do, the baggage that we carry, but they're also, there for us to start training our minds, setting the guardrails. But then we shouldn't dwell there. We shouldn't be stuck in sticking between those guardrails. We need to get beyond that and actually expressing our love and executing those rules with love. So then those rules don't become rules anymore. They become an expression of love. And that is bhakti. By definition, that is bhakti. That is the expression of love that's coming from our hearts. That is bhakti. Now, in terms of the juncture that we are, so this is where Sati is going to respond, and it's not a good response for people who are sitting around and hearing about this, because we hear about Sati, you know, immolating herself, putting herself on fire through meditation, and she leaves her body. So, with that, let's see if there's any discussion. I know I've been speaking for the last hour or so, a little over an hour. But I would say, let's pray for sincerity. Let's pray for our humility, and let's pray for genuine devotion, free from any imitation and pride.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam. So good to hear from you, and it's always a beautiful section of Bhagavatam, Daksha and the position of Sati. That is one of my very favorite chapters, and we can feel her deep intensity of the thoughts that are running in her mind. And as you said, the courage of conviction, that is the takeaway from today's class. Even when you said that I didn't understand what my principal said at that time when you were in high school, that word still is there in your mind, means he did the seed in your mind, just like how Suruchi planted in Dhrumaraj place. So even that young age, even if we don't understand, when time comes, it pops up and matures, so like the rosary tree. So very nice class. So I have one question all the time, because Sati is always looking only at her father, why he is not talking, or he is not showing attention to her and all these things. But she also ignored her mother and sisters, right? The way her father did to her, she is doing to her mother and sisters also. So is it a good thing? That's what I always used to have the confusion, because her father is an ignorant person. He is angry and he is doing that. And what about Sati? Because she sees that her mother is welcoming, and she is trying to ignore the father also at that time, because she didn't care her husband also, right? So she came to her, and she also tried to invite her in a welcoming way, in a nice manner also. So, but Sati also didn't care all these things, right, Prabhuji?
Good point, Mataji. Actually, see, if you look at the circumstance, she didn't listen to Lord Shiva for various reasons. Primary reason being her affection for her family was so strong, because after all, she could not just simply denounce her family and say, okay, you're my husband, I'm listening to you, so I'm just going to cut ties. No, I'm not going to go.
Mm.
It's very difficult, especially for the daughter,
Yeah, yeah.
considering that she was brought up the way she was brought up, and she was given the love and affection. It was very difficult for her, right? There were several sisters
Mm.
that, yeah, the family ties were so strong. So in spite of everything, she could hear what her husband, Lord Shiva, was saying,
Mm.
but still her heart was still pulling her towards going to the Yajna. And also,
Yeah.
my feeling and my understanding is that she also wanted to right the wrong. She was hopeful that by her going to the Yajna, attending the Yajna, in the absence of Lord Shiva, her husband,
Mm.
her father would come around.
Mm.
That slight hope is always there. Maybe
Yeah.
things will right themselves by, going there in person.
Yeah. That's the main reason she wanted to go also, not for this uh, other material thing. Just she can convince
Yeah,
her father on her own. Yeah.
correct.
Because
And
that
then
kind of
having got there,
attachment and love, as you said, she is the pet daughter also among all the other daughters.
and then once she goes there, the
Mm-hmm.
situation changes so quickly that her
Yeah.
father is ignoring her. She didn't
Mm.
expect that. She thought her father, of all people, who
Mm.
treated her so dearly. Even though her mother and her sisters were giving all that affection, for the daughter, the
Mm.
father holds a very special, special place in the heart. And similarly, for the
Yes.
father, the daughter holds a very special. I can
Yes,
say that
Prabhuji.
I have two daughters.
That is, you can say because you have two daughters. If there is a son
So
and daughter, then it is hard to say that.
that we cannot deny. That's a very, very
Yeah.
special, special feeling, right? So,
Yeah, you
so
are
it was
blessed twice, Prabhuji. Two daughters means you getting blessings, double blessings. Yeah.
so, so that feeling is so strong. So Sati was really, really impacted by that. If
Yeah.
Daksha had even said a word and acknowledged her
Mm-hmm.
presence there, it would have changed everything, I feel. Maybe she would have
Mm-hmm.
said, spoken a few harsh words, they would exchange a few harsh words between themselves, and the situation would have settled in. Like, most fathers and daughters have arguments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are kind, I mean, it's a different form of loving exchange, you can say.
Yeah, yeah. As you
This
said, silence is more painful than the
very,
harsh
very,
words. That's a beautiful line that you put. Silence is more painful.
yeah,
Silence is completely ignoring.
yes. And in a sense, not just ignoring, but also accepting that, you are wrong. I still stand
Mm,
by what I'm thinking, that your husband is not the right person.
mm,
That's what Daksha is expressing, which in itself is a huge insult, not only to Sati, but to Lord Shiva.
yeah.
So Sati is seeing all of this, putting that, processing all of that in her mind and saying, how can my father, who is a Prajapati, who is my father, he
Mm,
is doing something like this? This is not right.
mm,
So this has to be righted, and the way it has to be made right is by doing something very, very extreme, because it is an extreme situation. And
yeah.
then everything falls. So that's the reason why, even though her mother and sisters are offering, they're saying, "Hey, we love
Mm,
you. Look at us." She's not willing.
mm,
She's so moved and impacted and insulted, and the feelings are so strong, the emotions are so strong, that her
mm,
father is not giving her the love that she rightfully deserves. Is not happening. And also, the humiliation of her husband continues to
mm.
stay strong in Daksha's mind, and she can see right through that. She can see right through that. She
Yes.
knows that Daksha, even though he may say things that I love you, it may still
Mm,
not mean much, because he still has a lot of misgivings about Lord Shiva, his own son-in-law,
mm.
who's her husband. So it's a very complicated, very intense situation right there. Yes.
And
And
also,
that's
as
it.
you said, usually ladies are like that, and they feel that love and intensity of emotions
Yeah.
also. While she is with Shiva in the Kailash, she is thinking about the father and arguing with Shiva. And when she comes to father, she is supporting husband, and she is, yeah, her
And I'm
mind
sure,
is
if
always
she were with the husband, she'd be supporting the father. I mean, that's how
father.
daughters.
Yeah, yeah.
So they love both. I mean, they are.
Mm,
I mean, they're driven by their hearts more than their
mm.
minds. Whereas men, on the other hand, we are driven by our minds, and our egos kick in, and we become very hard-hearted, as Prabhupada said. But
Not
good.
hard-hearted. You can see the correct picture, Prabhuji. That's what I can see, because Shiva can see the correct picture because he is not influenced by this dualities, right?
Very true.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank
So
you,
good to
Mataji.
hear
Thank
from
you.
you.
Thank you. Very inspiring. Thanks, Vali Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
We'll give it another moment. Anyone else? Otherwise, we can close for today. Wishing you all a very happy and Krishna conscious week ahead. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa
Kripa
sindhubhyascha.
sindhubhyaya vacha, kripanam pavanebhyo